Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Amy Johnson, and I am happy to be your host for today's show, episode 258 of the Canadiens Connection podcast. Sitting in this week, once again, for Michael Spinella while he is out of town. Again, I'm just keeping the seat warm for him. And hope he's having a great day. Hope you're having a great day. We're here for episode 258, reigniting the Habs-Leafs rivalry. It's going to be a good one. And of course, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio today by my co-host to launch into this excellent episode. He's the editor-in-chief, founder, and president of Rocket Sports, as well as the site editor for the Hockey News Montreal team site, which can be found at thn.com/Montreal. And that's Mr. Rick Stevens. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Welcome back. Glad to have you back in hosting chair.
Thank you.
Happy National Dog Day to all of our dog-loving listeners and dog owners out there.
Did you wake up this morning and think that we were doing a vintage episode of From the Press Box?
Well, that's right. National Days.
Used to have a national day.
That's right. And where are they now? We should include that in here somewhere.
I know.
But this weekend, it's in the sporting world. F1 is returning after their summer break.
Thank God.
The Dutch Grand Prix, yeah.
A month without F1 was painful.
Mm-hmm.
It's painful.
And we're a few days away from final cuts to NFL rosters. And you know what that means. Fantasy football drafts are coming up.
Yeah, they are.
And we've seen NHL players starting to arrive in their respective cities. So, yeah, everything's happening.
No.
Mm-hmm. It's that time.
Kids are going back to school. I've noticed this week, the kids are trying to soak up in the neighborhood, they're trying to soak up every ounce of being outside during the day that they possibly can, because they know that
it's coming.
Big yellow school bus is coming, probably next week.
But for hockey fans and Canadiens fans, it means this long summer is about to be over, and we're into September next week.
I know. It's nuts. September means rookie camp's right around the corner. That means training camp's right around the corner, which means preseason is right around the corner. It's going to fly by. And today's episode is going to take you through all the latest, getting you caught up in the lead up to all of that. We're going to talk about some interesting stories regarding the Canadiens, update you on some roster information, touch on the Habs prospects, and get some news and updates from that topic, as well as we've got some quotes of the week this week. Kirby Dach and Paul Byron, both with some quotables this week. We're going to hear some audio from them before we talk about some general NHL hockey news and notes. All of that, of course, in the first segment. Then in our second segment, Rick and I are actually happy to be joined by a first-time guest this week. Hopefully won't be his last time. We had a great conversation with, you just heard me introduce Rick, not only in his roles here at Rocket Sports, but also as the site editor for the Hockey News Montreal new team site. And so today we have Michael Traikos joining us today. He is the managing editor for all 32 team sites for the Hockey News and their online network of websites now. And so Michael Traikos is going to join us today. But, his career has been spent covering the Maple Leafs. So
why would we want to talk about the Maple Leafs? Well, it's because the Habs-Leafs is one of the greatest rivalries in all of sports. So, yeah. And as you said, the the title of this episode, Reigniting That Habs-Leafs Rivalry.
That's right. So we're gonna get that reignition started today with a really entertaining and an insightful interview with Michael Traikos coming up in the second segment. Then finally, in the third segment, we're going to wrap up today, getting you caught up on all of the latest content from the Rocket Sports Media team across all of our platforms, in case you missed anything over the past week. If you are into fantasy sport, Rick was just talking about the NFL. If you're into fantasy football, we're going to have an announcement for you in the third segment, so be sure to listen for that, as well as some updates on joining the Rocket Sports team. We're going to hear, we're continuing that series of ours of introducing you to some of our Rocket Sports team members. You're going to meet another one of our contributors today. Get you to answer the question of the week. We're going to hear some of your responses from last week's show. It's just tons of fun top to bottom.
Very busy show.
Very busy show. Now, don't forget, this is an interactive podcast. It means Rick and I are going to sit here for the next hour or so and bring you all of this news and analysis and opinion and insights. But a big part of our show and everything we do here at Rocket Sports is that we want to connect with all of you. This is the Canadiens Connection. And so the way for you to get involved with the podcast, maybe you'll even hear your comments on a future episode. Shoot us a text anytime at the Rocket Sports text line. You can find that at 5853-ROCKET. Again, that's 5853-ROCKET. You can also drop us a comment by following us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Habs Connection is the handle to search for. And of course, you can visit our website, CanadiensConnection.fm, to catch up on any episodes that you might have missed over the summer while you were enjoying your holidays, vacations, cottage time, that type of thing. Just check out CanadiensConnection.fm.
And we're just going to we'll probably remind you a couple of times today to subscribe to the Canadiens Connection podcast on whatever podcast app you prefer. There's once the season starts, there's a mess of different information coming at you. So we want to make sure that our podcast is coming to you every week. Best way to do that is subscribe.
Absolutely. And be sure to bookmark thn.com/Montreal for the upcoming season for all of our coverage. All right, let's start with some fun stories. Carey Price was in Brossard this past week at the. It's going to take a little while
CN
to not
Sports
say
Complex to you, yeah.
Yes, to not say the Bell Sports Complex, the CN Sports Complex. The Brossard practice facility. He was there on Wednesday to hand out some gifts to young participants from the Canadiens Youth Hockey School. And, I absolutely loved the lead up to this. The Canadiens, there's plenty of times I'm critical of the Canadiens social media team, but they captured a really cute moment of Carey kind of tucked behind a wall panel so that as the kids came in and sat down in the room just getting ready for whatever little session they were going to have, little did they know that just around the corner in this wall panel, Carey Price was just hiding and waiting to come out and surprise them. I thought it was adorable.
It was, and he was there to hand out gifts to them for the hockey school, as well as take selfies with all of them, do autographs. They were surprised and thrilled to see Carey Price at the hockey school.
Absolutely. Very fun. And that was in the midst of a busy week because Carey and Angela celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary this week. So I'm sure there were plenty of plans on the docket for Mr. Price at home as well. Congratulations
to Carey and Angela. And I thought it was a real touching message that Angela posted to Instagram. She was speaking to Carey and said, "Over this past decade, we've shared countless unforgettable memories, conquered obstacles together, and grown in ways we never imagined possible. But through it all, I never truly appreciated the depth of your love until this past week. You've shown me what it truly means to be there for someone, not just in good times, but during the darkest moments as well. Your support and compassion have been a constant source of comfort for me and my family, and for that I'm eternally grateful." A beautiful message, but also she touches on that it's been a difficult week or so for Angela and her family with the passing of her dad recently.
Yeah, and you had even pointed out that She had included with that message not only a beautiful wedding picture, but also pictures of Carrie, some touching pictures of Carrie with her dad from their wedding day as well, which was really nice. There's no denying, I think, that Cole Caufield has had a very fun summer.
This is the summer of Cole.
It's the summer of Cole. He out playing golf again. We've seen him caddying. Was he caddying for Trevor Zegras earlier this year? We've seen him on the links with Nick Suzuki. And this time he's popping up on social media playing golf with none other than this year's second overall draft selection, Adam Fantilli, along with Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, a little odd that you put together that group for a round of golf, but it looks like they had a great time. Both hockey players with actor and comedian Jeff Daniels.
It's pretty fun. I like that a lot. Moving to some roster news for the Canadiens. Now, nothing official has been released about this from the NHL or from the Canadiens themselves, so we'll preface this by saying that. But we know that it's quite frequent that René Lavoie from TVA Sport sometimes has access to information that he is able to pass along to his social media followers prior to it becoming official.
Can I translate that?
I was saying it diplomatic.
You are. The Canadians leak information to René Lavoie for sure.
Good, that's fine. So, according to René Lavoie this week, Canadiens defensive prospect Logan Mailloux has now been cleared to play in the NHL if and when he earns himself a roster spot. Again, that's according to René Lavoie. But if René Lavoie is saying it, you can pretty much almost guarantee that that's going to be an official announcement at some point.
Last we heard in official capacity from the organization, it was Kent Hughes in his recent media availability. He said that Logan Mailloux had met with NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman during July. And at that time, Kent Hughes said that he didn't have any information to share. And this has been a long process. The Canadiens have worked with Logan, worked with him carefully. Rob Ramage said that he spent more time with Logan Mailloux than his son over the last year. And on the hockey side, we should just remind everybody that Logan Mailloux had a fabulous season last year. 25 goals, 53 points in 59 games with the London Knights, then added another 24 points in 21 playoff games. So a really good season. Hasn't played a lot, because of injuries and whatnot. He hasn't played a full season, but he will be expected to come to training camp and compete for a spot on the Canadiens, likely heading to Laval in the fall.
Speaking of rumors circulating, there have been some in Montreal, particularly, who have speculated that Mattias Norlinder was not going to return to North American hockey this coming season. That he was not going to be returning to Laval or Canadiens training camp, that he would play in Europe. And essentially, his agent came out. This was actually an article that came out in Europe. His agent came out and, well, I can't use the word that he used to describe that rumor, but let's just say if I say that he basically literally called it BS, put a big kibosh on that rumor very directly.
Yeah, his name is Klaes Ellenfalk from the CAA player agency. Very respectable agency in hockey. And listen, this is awful. This rumor came from one person, Grant McKaig, and he had zero information to go on. And it grew steam. It was featured twice on a YouTube podcast, and he said that Mattias Norlinder hadn't adjusted to the North American game, and so that he was done with the Montreal Canadiens and expect to see him in the SHL this season. None of that is true. And his agent said, Matthias and I don't know where this false rumor comes from. Maddie can't wait to join the Canadiens at the next training camp, and he'll be on the plane at the beginning of September coming to Montreal. He went on to describe the rumor, as you said, and then included the word dementia. Okay. So they are furious about this rumor, and very, very unfortunate, and just mean when stuff like this gets generated without any facts behind it.
Absolutely, and is why you will never find a member of the Rocket Sports media team peddling in rumor that has not been absolutely confirmed by a direct source or something that hasn't been made official. Speaking of making things official, the Canadiens have put out their schedule of promo nights for this upcoming season. And, you know, for some fans, there are plenty of fans out there who plan out which games they are going to part with their hard-earned money for around the promo schedule, because sometimes there's some pretty fun promotions that can be done. I remember the Flyers did a promo night a couple of years ago. They did Russian nesting dolls for Ivan Provorov.
All right.
Which was a
collectible now, given that he's in Columbus.
But just that was a brilliant promo night, and everybody wanted to be there to get this stupid little Ivan Provorov nesting dolls. So the Canadiens have released their promos for the upcoming season. Of course, there's a Hockey Fights Cancer night as usual. There's the obligatory bobblehead nights. Those are always a collectible item.
Several, yeah.
A hockey mascot party. Unless Gritty's going to be there, well, maybe they're going for the family-oriented mascot party, because if Gritty was there, I don't think it would be.
Yeah, they're talking about the release says that they're still cleaning up fur and popcorn from last year's edition of the mascot party, but they talk about Mick E. Moose will be there, and Slapshot, the New Jersey Devil, and the Chicago Bulls mascot. So we got a little bit of NBA action. Benny the Bull, and they say for that night, it's bring your own lint brush.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Is that metal thing going to be there? Can it not?
Yeah, it hasn't been a hit.
No,
at all.
It's been as popular as the reverse retro jersey that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Last but not least, another golf-related piece of news. Jake Allen's Classic Golf Tournament took place, and it's an annual tournament that Jake Allen sponsors, took place and raised $50,000.
A wonderful event. It happened at the beginning of August in his hometown of New Brunswick, and he brings together all kinds of memorabilia. There's some great. There's a mask. There's jerseys. There's all kinds of memorabilia to be had. Raised $50,000 this year, and he has a charity by the name of Program 34 that has been raising money over the last few years for charitable causes. That's totaling about $550,000 now over the past few years. So wonderful event. Well done, Jake Allen.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to switch gears now from the Canadiens and take a quick peek at the Habs prospect report.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world. Bookmark thn.com/Montreal to follow our comprehensive coverage of Canadiens prospects.
Top of the list for the prospect report is actually not related to Habs prospects in terms of the players themselves, but more an organizational piece of news. It's been a bit of, I hate to use the word turmoil, but there's been a lot of turnover going on in the ECHL with the Trois-Rivières Lions, the ECHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens. You'll recall just a couple of months ago, Michael and Rick on the show mentioned the announcement that Pascal Riaume had been appointed as the new head coach. Do you also have a management position?
A GM, yeah.
GM and head coach for the upcoming season of the Trois-Rivières Lions. Now it has been announced that Pascal Riaume has been tapped in the 11th hour, apparently, for a yet unnamed AHL position, and has left the organization with Trois-Rivières' blessing. And so in his place, they have announced that former assistant coach Ron Schulz has been promoted to the role of head coach and general manager. I can't even... Every time you blink, there's something new going on with Trois-Rivières and its coaching staff or management.
In less than a calendar year, it was back in November, the season just a month old, head coach Eric Belanger left Trois-Rivières to join a Q team in Drummondville, I believe. And so that forced general manager Marc-Andre Bergeron, he was the vice president and GM, to also take over the head coaching duties. In June, towards the end of June, he was fired. And they brought in, Pascal Riaume was an assistant coach in that regime. And so he was promoted to head coach and GM. And they brought in Ron Schulz as an assistant coach early July. So now you go from being an assistant coach to the head coach and GM in a very short period of time. They have cycled through a number of head coaches and GMs, all a part of this restructuring. They've added Matthew Brodeur, Alex Cousineau. There's a lot going on in Trois-Rivières, and that's not the end of it. Because there's lots of reports out there about the sale of the Trois-Rivières Lions.
A potential sale. The Trois-Rivières Lions are currently owned by DSE, which is Deacon Sports Entertainment, the same company that owns the ECHL's Newfoundland Growlers and former owner of the ECHL's Iowa Heartlanders. The Heartlanders were sold by DSE
in July.
Just earlier this summer. And now there are rumors swirling that DSE might also have Trois-Rivières up for sale as well, potentially putting them back to only owning a single ECHL franchise, which would be the Growlers in Newfoundland. So that's all.
What's happening?
That's all still kind of to be determined, as well as where did Pascal Riaume run off to? Trois-Rivières in their statement said, "Look, if the AHL comes calling, we wish him the best. Of course, we're not going to stop you from pursuing something in the American Hockey League. It also means that we had selected the right person." I'm going to go ahead, since we all know if DraftKings had a betting option for this, I'd put money on it. My prediction as to where in the end of August is someone searching for a guy like Pascal Riaume to join an AHL coaching staff. My money is on Joel Bouchard in Syracuse. Joel Bouchard is the brand new head coach of the Syracuse Crunch after having a year off of being involved in AHL coaching. And I would bet if there's someone who would be looking to add a Pascal Riaume to his coaching staff, possibly it could be Joel Bouchard. So I have not, that is pure educated guess on my part. I'm not saying that I've heard anything speculating about that. That's just if somebody said take your guess as to where it'll be, I'm going to say Syracuse. I could be completely wrong, but I'm just putting it out there.
And it's reasonable. It's reasonable speculation. Joel Bouchard, named the Syracuse Crunch head coach, brought Daniel Jacob with him as his assistant. He was also the assistant in Laval. So as part of building out his coaching staff in Syracuse, we'll see if there are any other additions.
That's right. Also, this week, Corey Pronman with The Athletic put out his annual NHL pipeline rankings article. Not really, for me, too much of a surprise to see Chicago in the top 3. I mean, when your prospect pipeline includes Connor Bedard, it's automatically kind of puts you in a good position. Also, not surprised to see the Buffalo Sabres in the top 3. They've been much talked about in the last year or so about how much they are restocking the cupboard. Ottawa is another one that gets kind of tossed around in the same breath as Buffalo in terms of what they're doing to build their prospect pipeline. But I find it interesting, Rick, that the Canadiens actually beat out Ottawa in Corey Pronman's rankings this year, improving one position over their ranking last year, now falling in 6th place for the Montreal Canadiens prospect pipeline rankings. Ottawa right behind them in 7th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and we should say it's difficult to compare these prospect rankings depending on who prepares them, because they use different definitions.
That's right.
And you'll notice players in Corey Pronman's rankings that have considerable NHL experience.
Right.
His criteria is players 22 years and younger, and as of September 15th. So, for example, Cole Caufield leads the Canadiens pipeline rankings, which you wouldn't see him in some of the others. But I think it's just important, as you said, to go back and look at how the Canadiens have progressed in Corey Pronman's rankings, moving up, as you said, from 7th to 6th in that top 10. And I was looking mostly at the Eastern Conference teams. You have the Canadiens at 6th. Buffalo at third. Buffalo takes the 3rd spot. New Jersey Devils at 4th. Columbus Blue Jackets 5th, and as you mentioned, Ottawa 7th. The Detroit Red Wings in 8th. Those are the Eastern Conference teams in the top 10.
It was really interesting. There were some interesting aspects of the article. I was interested in how he evaluated newcomer Alex Newhook being in there. I very much like to see that he's pretty high on Justin Barron, sees him as a middle of the lineup kind of defenseman. And I also found it interesting. You and I discussed how recently when Scott Wheeler put out his prospect rankings, that for the Canadiens, he was completely dumbfounded as to why Jan Mysak hasn't been a better producer on the stat sheet, because when you watch him play, he's a better hockey player when you watch him play than is reflected on his stat sheet. I was interested to see that Corey Pronman had sort of a similar analysis of Jan Mysak, that he definitely believes he's got all the tools in the toolkit. It's just about getting them put together and put in a position where he can actually show them off.
So we're not going to go through all of these, but the top 5, and this should be no surprise to Canadiens fans, the top 5 Canadiens prospects, according to Corey Pronman, 22 years of age and under. Number 1, Cole Caufield. Number 2, Juraj Slafkovsky. Number 3, David Reinbacher. Number 4, Kirby Dach. And number 5, Caden Gooley.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. So, moving along, speaking of some other youngsters and so forth, Kirby Dach appeared on a podcast this week, hosted by a couple of guys from the Boston area, so I would imagine they're Bruins fans.
Mm-hmm, they are.
And he had some. They asked him about playing in Montreal. I mean, Kirby Dach's now spent a year playing in the Bell Center, and he actually apparently has already really been very, very positively impressed by what it is to be a hockey player playing in the city of Montreal.
It's cool. It's such a different city. It's honestly insane to play there. I've been there for a year now, and it's been probably the most fun I've had playing hockey since junior. So I've enjoyed playing there, and the fans are unbelievable. The city's great. The rink is electric. Like, I think it's probably one of the best rinks to play in. Hands down, the ice is great. Like, there's no complaints there.
Kirby Dach sounding pretty positive and looking forward to getting back to Montreal. He's spent his summer in Alberta. During the week, Monday to Friday, he's in the gym doing some skating and also doing some skating. And then on the weekend, he's on the lake, in the boat, doing some water skiing and generally enjoying summer. But good to hear him. The most important thing I thought of that interview was he said he's having fun, the most fun he's had playing hockey since junior.
Absolutely. It must have been the week to appear on podcast of Boston-based people because Paul Byron made an appearance on Chris Nyland's podcast, Raw Knuckles. And he had some really, really interesting things to say. Of course, the biggest topic and probably the biggest question is that big hint that Kent Hughes dropped during his most recent press conference on the Jeff Petrie trade, which was that Paul Byron's playing career is over. And now Byron hasn't made a retirement announcement yet. There hasn't been anything like that, but of course it was a subject of conversation when he spoke with Chris Nyland.
If I'm not a hockey player, I'd certainly love the opportunity to help the young guys do something within player development or coaching hockey. I don't know if I have a desire to be an NHL coach or American League coach or anything like that, but I certainly had a good time coaching my son's team and being involved as an assistant coach, and it's fun. It's fun to pass on your knowledge to the kids, and I think I have a lot of experience at different levels and in different organizations and battle through a lot. So I feel like if I can help a couple kids and help them and maybe help them grow, it'd be great.
Coaching my son's team, we've heard that before, haven't we? As far as
maybe he thinks, well, apparently that's all the experience I need in order to be an NHL coach. So
this was a great answer from Paul Byron, and him being involved in player development seems like a natural step for him. We talked about the Canadiens development camp at the beginning of July, and Paul Byron spoke to those players, and his message at that time was, that he was willing to do anything. He was willing to be an energy guy. He was willing to kill penalties. He was willing to pass the water bottles on the bench if that's what it meant. He was willing to do anything to keep his spot in the NHL. Very inspirational speaker, and as you said, nothing official as far as his retirement announcement or next steps, but I think it sounds like something's going to happen with him with respect to the team's player development cohort.
And so what would he tell young players like he did at development camp back at the beginning of July? Well, he kind of described that as well.
You got to be great every day. Yeah. I think that's the hardest thing as a young player to learn. Montreal, the cameras are on every day. Every single practice, there's media, there's people watching you, dissecting you, there's TV shows. And you're not really paying attention to that as a player, I get that, but they're there. They're talking about it. The coaches, the GM, they watch you every day. Like, some coaches tape the practices and go back and rewatch, and you might not think it as a player, but that, little pass that you messed up or that system drill that you were in the right spot at the right time, like you're not showing confidence in the coach by not getting those things right. Like, execution every single day matters. Going to the gym and doing the workout every day matters. Weighing in, doing everything right matters. Like, just being consistent every day gives you the best chance to be a great NHLer. Great message. You got to be great every day, and it's all about commitment and consistency, I think, was his message there. The camera's always on, so you got to give your full effort and execute every single day. Absolutely. No days off, according to Paul Byron. Yeah. All right. Just taking a look at
hockey-related news in general. Starting this portion of the segment off with some sad news, actually, that actually just came out today. Revered journalist in Montreal, Ivan Pedneau, sadly passed away.
Passed away on Friday night at the young age of 77. He had been recently diagnosed with cancer, and very sad. Almost 60 years in broadcasting, in covering sports in Quebec. Long-time reporter of the Montreal Canadiens for various outlets, most recently TBS Sports. He covered Olympics. He covered. As they said in a tribute article, everything from bowling to hockey, which is where he started his career. Won an Elmer Ferguson Awards, and just a terrific pillar of the Quebec sports media landscape. So. Tough news there.
Absolutely.
And we extend our condolences to his family.
Couple of big pieces of contract news happening around the league this week worth noting. First up is the New York Rangers signing forward Alexis Lafreniere to a 2-year contract worth $4.6 million.
$2.3 million per year for the next 2 seasons on the cap. Maybe some fans might think that's a little low, but he hasn't really shown a whole lot. 39 points last season was his personal high. Maybe not in line with the first overall pick of the 2020 draft. But I know that our audience is interested because, as he was sitting as a restricted free agent, we kept getting messages about why don't the Canadiens make a hostile offer. But it's interesting that there's other restricted free agents still unsigned. Trevor Zegras, probably the most notable in Anaheim. Shane Pinto, Morgan Frost in Philadelphia. But he is now locked up for the next 2 years by the New York Rangers.
But the big news of the week, of course, was that the Maple Leafs re-signed. They've gotten the contract extension done already before the year even begins. For forward Auston Matthews, inking him to a 4-year extension worth $53 million.
Yeah, and when this takes effect next year, he will be the highest paid player at $13.25 million in the National Hockey League. And we'll see if that carries them past the first round, the Toronto Maple Leafs. But we're going to talk about the rivalry between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs coming up in just a second.
That's right. We are. That's actually coming up just in a couple of minutes on the other side of our first commercial break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Former Toronto Maple Leafs beat reporter and current NHL columnist Michael Traikos is going to join us here in the studio for a really fun interview. And yeah, we're reigniting this Habs-Leafs rivalry. Let's start this season off the right way and get all that blood boiling again. And of course, still to come, we're also going to be throwing out your question of the week. This week, we're going to want to know what your favorite Habs-Leafs memory is, and I'm sure there are plenty for you to choose from. So we want to know. Be sure to text us at 585-3-ROCKET. Leave your comments on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Habs Connection. And you can also leave a comment at Rocket Sports as well. So we are going to tackle all of that coming up after this short break. So stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
New customers, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. Bet just $5 to score $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, KS. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casinos at Charlestown Races. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 and over in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. 1 boost per eligible game. Opt-in required. Max bet $50. 10-plus leg requisite for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/baseball terms.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, my name is Amy Johnson. You can find me on Twitter, by the way, over at Flyers Rule. And of course, with me in the studio is our president and founder of Rocket Sports, the site editor for thn.com/Montreal, the Hockey News Montreal team site. That's Rick Stevens. And you can follow him at Rocket Sports on Twitter. Also, be sure to follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Visit our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast while you're there. Or, hey, whatever podcast app or player you're currently listening to this show in, just take a look down and tap that subscribe button. Also, if you're listening to this podcast, watching this podcast on our YouTube channel, don't forget to hit subscribe there as well and tap the notification bell so that you're always made aware of every time we drop a new video. All right, the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, you know it, you love it. They're the NHL's 2 oldest teams. Their rivalry is one of the biggest and greatest in all of sports. These 2 original 6 franchises have fans in every city in Canada and all over the planet. I mean, they're just everywhere. There's so much history between both teams. They've met in the Stanley Cup playoffs 16 times. Canadiens have won 9 of those series, including that one in 2021. We all remember that one. Overall, the Canadiens lifted the cup in their history 24 times. The Leafs have done it 13 times. And even though, the Habs fans like to kind of give some grief to the Leafs that they've won so many more of them, those 2 teams comprise the top 2 teams to win the Stanley Cup in all of NHL history. So it's a really important rivalry as far as the NHL is concerned. It's a very important rivalry in Canadian sports history as well. And so joining us to discuss the state of the Canadiens Maple Leafs rivalry right now is joining us in the studio, Michael Traikos, former columnist for Post Media and former Toronto Maple Leafs beat reporter. Well, Rick, this week I'm pretty excited about being able to welcome in and introduce our special guest on the show this week, appearing with us for the first time, and I think it's going to be a really fun conversation today. Happy to welcome onto the show Michael Traikos. He is the managing editor for the Hockey News' new batch of 32 NHL team sites. He is of course, former columnist for Post Media, Toronto, former Maple Leafs beef reporter, also the author of the book The Next Ones, How McDavid, Matthews, and a Group of Young Guns Took Over the NHL. Lots of expertise, lots of experience around our sport that we all love so much. Michael Traikos, thanks so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you here on the Canadiens Connection podcast.
Yeah, love the introduction. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be talking about hockey after what seemed like a longer summer than usual. I don't know why that was, but it feels like everything's ramping up now. I can almost hear the skate blades on the ice for informal skates as we get closer to training camp. So let's get at her.
Absolutely. Well, I'm actually going to, I want to kick us off today talking a little bit about the big reason why we've gotten a chance to begin working with you, and that is through the Hockey News and the 32 NHL team sites. It's unfortunate that in our industry and sports media these days, it's more common to see sports pages and sports coverage disappearing from so many publications. But what's refreshing and kind of invigorating and exciting is that the Hockey News is doing the opposite. The Hockey News is expanding, recently launching these full 32 team sites, including THN Montreal, which of course Rick is the site editor for. I'm a contributor for. So can you talk to us just a little bit to start about the philosophy behind the Hockey News' plan of let's not do less, let's do more, and give hockey fans across the league what they're really hungry for?
Yeah, it is exciting, and the Hockey News is, it's been around since the early 40s. I think 1947 was when it was officially founded, and like you mentioned, I was with Post Media. The landscape right now is most legacy media is shrinking. So to come to the Hockey News, where we're in full expansion mode, and I'm the managing editor of our team sites, which, if you don't know already, we have 32 team sites covering every single team in the NHL. As well, we have 4 theme sites, and those range from everything from women's hockey and betting to fantasy and the world of e-gaming. And literally every day or every week, we're going to have new team and theme sites launching. So we're going to be having an AHL one, an ECHL one for the IIHF, a business one. You name it, we're going to be having it. So extremely excited about that. Just I really hope, and if it wasn't already, the Hockey News is going to be your destination for all hockey news, and that includes the NHL, but it also just includes anything you might be interested in. So really excited to be in charge of this new venture, and we've only been really, I'd say the 32 teams sites launched sometime right before the draft and at the end of June. So we're still in early days, but already the feedback has been incredible. The numbers are growing. Fan interest is at an all-time high. So for us to pivot from really the hard copy magazine, which is still, we're still printing that alongside this new venture, but for anyone going online for video, podcast, and written news, the Hockey News is the place to be right now.
The Hockey News is a place to be for Canadiens fans as well. And we know that Habs fans are everywhere. But they're a little bit discerning and maybe a little skeptical of Toronto-based coverage of the Montreal Canadiens coming from TSN or Sportsnet. Talk to us how Canadiens fans are going to be well served by Canadian-specific coverage on the Hockey News.
Well, I think we've hired the best in the business, and yourself, Rick, and your team to cover the Habs. So I'm really excited about the content that's already coming out of your site. Obviously, it's an English language Montreal Canadiens site. The plan is to have a French language site to run alongside. But yeah, this is an interesting time for the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, they're in a transition period. You could see a core developing between Nick Suzuki, Cole Caufield, and Yuri Slafkovsky. I think that core is going to be changing and growing as the years go on. But expectations for the Montreal Canadiens, I think right now, is to continue letting the youngsters develop and grow. And if you're a Montreal Canadiens fans, I think this is the most exciting time for to be a fan when you're watching these young guys go from draft lore to whether it's in the AHL or even just getting your feet wet in the NHL and starting to make your mark. None of these guys have really hit their prime years yet, I'd say. A lot of them are still in that kind of the ceiling hasn't been etched out in stone. So really excited to see what another year with Suzuki and Caufield and what they can do as they're getting a little older and a little bit more comfortable in the league, and to have the coverage daily of these youngsters, I think this is going to be really exciting.
It is really exciting. And I think something that maybe our listeners may not know is the owner, the publisher of the Hockey News, Graham Roustan. I've gotten to know a little bit over the last 3 years, and He is he has roots in Quebec. Born in Sherbrooke, attended Concordia University. Very proud of his Quebec roots, and I've enjoyed talking to him. You've gotten to know him, and he's really passionate about the Canadiens and hockey in Quebec.
Oh, 100%. And that's always the misnomer, Rick, is that, the Hockey News is located in Toronto. The Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto. Like you mentioned, Sportsnet and TSN. It can feel very Toronto-centric. And, jokingly, we always refer to Toronto as the center of the hockey universe because, at times it feels like there's only one team that anyone is always focused on. I disagree. Anyone who's been to Montreal, whether it's in season, whether it's in playoffs, or whether it's even in the off season, you cannot talk to two people on the street without having some sort of Habs conversation. It really is a religion there. Mm-hmm. And some of the best writers who've covered this game, whether it's Red Fisher, whether it's Michael Farber, they all come from Montreal. So it's a rich history there. And you mentioned Graham. He's passionate about hockey in general. And if you're going to put a gun to his head, I'm sure he'd say it's probably the Habs number one team. But, let's face it, there's two teams that are going to push the needle in the NHL. One is in Toronto, one is in Montreal. And whenever they meet, it's fireworks. And I covered that last series between Montreal and Toronto during the COVID year when there was that all-Canadian division. And you know what? I don't remember another playoff atmosphere that felt like that during my period. And granted, my 20 years in the business here, I didn't get to cover a Stanley Cup final featuring the Leafs. I didn't even get to cover a third round series featuring the Leafs. So that Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leaf series, even though there weren't any fans in the building in Toronto, there were just reporters, and we were all kind of segregated because of COVID restrictions. Still, that atmosphere was buzzing, and you could feel it in the city at that time.
Just want to, before we kind of move further into that Leafs-Habs rivalry, just want to kind of take you back a minute and ask you a couple of quick hockey nostalgia questions. Okay. You grew up in the Metro Toronto area. Did you have a favorite childhood hockey memory? Did you have a favorite player that you watched at all when you were younger? Particularly growing up in the Toronto area, was there someone in the Canadiens lineup that you hated to see when the Leafs and the Habs met? Talk to us a little bit about those early days.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was mentioning to you guys earlier that I've been a hockey fan. Always grew up playing hockey, but for whatever reason, maybe because the tickets were so hard to come by in Toronto, I always kind of gravitated towards more of the Blue Jays and baseball because the tickets were more accessible. That being said, Wendell Clark was always a guy that I really appreciated for the kind of style of game he played. We're talking about a first overall pick who, while he had skill and he had a great wrist shot, if you're thinking about the kind of game that Wendell Clark played, it was more lunch pail. He was going to hit you. He was going to drop the gloves with you. He was
tough as nails. Tough as nails.
Yeah, so those are the kind of guys that I always gravitated towards. For a memory, that Doug Gilmour wraparound against Curtis Joseph in the St. Louis Blues, that one is probably, if you're going to talk to people of my generation who are in their 40s, that's probably the high point. And that Leafs team that just fell short against the LA Kings. Can you imagine if they had to beat Gretzky and the Kings and faced the Montreal Canadiens in 93? I'm not saying that the Leafs would have had the cup and not the Habs, but that would have been a great series, a great final. So those are my memories. As for who I didn't like on the Habs, that's a tough one. I don't know if the Habs really had a guy that kind of got under Leaf fans' skin or was just a pest. I think it was the other way around. I think a lot of Montreal Canadian fans either didn't like Darcy Tucker or didn't like Mikhail Grabovski, didn't like those kind of guys. Like when the Tucker Kovalev stuff was happening in the regular season, or I always appreciated the game that Kovalev played and kind of was almost like on Montreal's side during that time. So it's tough to say, like, if there was a Habs player that you kind of grew to hate, even Patrick Roy, you had to appreciate just the beauty that he was in that.
You touched on that 1993 series, and of course the Canadiens are the last Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup. What's your explanation for why it's been why a Canadian Cup drought has lingered on for decades?
Well, part of the reason is there's only 7 teams out of the 32, so the numbers aren't really for you. The other thing is just, and I did the series with my colleague Mike Zeisberger when I was at the Sun a few years back, the year that no Canadian team made the playoffs. I think that was, if memory serves correct, I think that was the 2015-16 season where none of the Canadian teams made it to the playoffs. And we did a 6-part series called Whoa Canada, or I think it was Doe Canada or Oh No Canada. And basically looking at everything from poor drafting, poor management, the pressure, the fact that free agents weren't inclined to play there. If I had to sum it all up, it's really just been bad luck. If I'm looking at the rosters right now, every year I seem to think that this is going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs year. I look at Edmonton and the 2 powerhouses they have there in McDavid and Draisaitl, and I think it's just a matter of time before, whether it's Toronto, whether it's Edmonton, heck, even Winnipeg, I thought would have won a cup or at least made the final when they had that star-studded roster, when they had Laine, Scheifele, Wheeler, Hellebuck. So there's been some really good Canadian teams. For whatever reason, though, they keep falling short in the playoffs, and honestly, I don't have an explanation for it. The only thing I can say is it's going to happen. Whether it's going to happen in my lifetime is another question.
Well, what has happened is a real fierce rivalry between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. You touched on it a minute ago about the atmosphere in the building, even in the regular season when the 2 teams meet, although it's been a while since they are in the same region in the regular season standings. But you mentioned that playoff series, it was 3-1 playoff series. And what do you have to say about the state of the Habs-Leafs rivalry at this point?
It's pretty dormant right now, Rick. Unfortunately. It always seems like the teams can't be good at the same time.
Yeah.
And even that year when Montreal went to the final, that was not a very good Montreal Canadiens team. They almost caught lightning in a bottle, or losing to the Lightning. But they were down 3-1 to the Leafs. That was a Leaf team that lost John Tavares in Game 1, then lost Jake Muzzin on defense. Carey Price was playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
After just a ho-hum regular season. In the next round, I think Scheifele got suspended, so you're out with you're missing another number 1 center. The next round, Chandler Stevenson went out, so again a number 1 or 2 center for Vegas. And it really was the Carey Price story alongside Suzuki and Caufield, kind of showing glimpses of what's to come. So unfortunately, that season seems so long ago now, because shortly after, Montreal is in a bit of a retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. But the Leafs, I think their window is open on. They just signed Auston Matthews to a 4-year extension, so I would say the window for the Leafs to win is 5 years now, because he's got 1 year remaining on his contract. I'm hopeful that by year, in a couple years, maybe 3 years, that it will be a Montreal-Toronto rivalry again. But you look into this year, I think most people would probably say that Montreal is destined to finish last in that division. And if they do, that's probably a good thing, because they're going to get another top prospect at the end of the year.
That's right. And you said retool, the buzzwords being used: retool, rebuild. In your 20 years, you've you've seen a lot of teams go through rebuilds, some successful, some, well, more often than not fail. What's your take on the current Canadiens rebuild led by Jeff Gordon, Kent Hughes, Marty St. Louis? I think the fans have an opinion, but as an outsider to Montreal, what are you thinking of the Canadiens rebuild so far?
I like it. I think with any rebuild, you got to get lucky, and you have to have a draft where you have an Auston Matthews or a Connor McDavid. And I think the one thing that Montreal wasn't fortunate was the year that they did pick number 1 overall. It was a year where no one knew who the top prospect was. So they end up with Slafkovsky, and time will tell if he is the legitimate number 1 pick from that draft. It might be Logan Cooley. Shane Wright was a guy that forever is going to be linked to the Habs' future and fortunes, because he's a guy that I think a lot of us thought would go number 1. He ended up falling. Would he fall to 4th overall?
4th, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, to Seattle. So there was a lot of mystery with that draft. So we'll see. But the thing I'll say about Montreal and how they've handled it is they've kept a lot of veterans around who the young guys are going to learn from. And I think that can go a long way. I know when the Leafs were going through their rebuild and Matthews and Marner and Nylander were rookies, they had guys like James Van Riemsdyk, Nazem Kadri, Tyler Bozak, even Dion Phaneuf was around there for that. Guys that they could learn from, that they could, teach them how to be professionals. And I look at that Montreal roster right now, and the fact that Brendan Gallagher's still on the team is going to be huge for them. Josh Anderson, another guy, and even some of the guys that are youngish, like I really like Kirby Dach. I think he's a guy that, he's not quite a green player. He's still kind of learning the game, obviously, but to have him alongside the Suzukis and the Caufields is gonna bode well for the future.
You mentioned this a moment ago, and not usually used to having big hockey news dropping in the midst of August, but it's undeniable. Not a slow news week in the hockey world with the news out of Toronto just recently that the Leafs did lock up Auston Matthews for another 4 years, which when that contract goes into effect, it'll make him the highest paid player in the NHL at $13.25 million a season. Canadiens Connection listeners, while they'll be certainly interested in those numbers and the term, I have a feeling they more likely probably want to hear about a different Toronto Maple Leafs player. And in fact, Rick, I think you have a listener question related to that.
That's right. And it's perfect timing that Michael is here to answer this. This question came in from Jeremy in Alberta on our Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Just text us 24 hours a day, 5853-ROCKET. And I'll just read the question for you, Michael. It says, "Hey, Canadiens Connection. My name is Jeremy from Alberta and have been listening to your podcast for a while now. Question for you. What do you think of putting William Nylander on the top line next to Suzuki and Caufield? How dangerous would that line be? And do you think that Nylander is the type of player that could be the final piece that the Habs need in order to be playoff ready in the next couple of years, along with solid development from existing players? Secondly, what would you be willing to give up for Nylander?" And as you're thinking about how to answer that, Michael, I'm going to play William Nylander was asked on the 32 Thoughts podcast this week about his upcoming free agent contract, and he said this.
No, like I said, I still have one more year, and I know how much I love it there. And I mean, it would take a lot for me to want to leave Toronto. That's a place I want to be at, and that's where my mind's at for the coming year and for the future. I'm not thinking about being anywhere else. So
he right now wants to be in Toronto. Jeremy wants William Nylander to be in Montreal. How do you answer Jeremy's question?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think there's probably a list of teams, that would love to have William Nylander on the roster. This is a guy that, 2 years ago, he gets 34 goals, 80 points. Last year, 40 goals, 87 points. And that's while playing not on the Matthews-Marner line. So he's playing with Tavares. In a lot of cases, he was driving that line. In the playoffs, almost a point per game guy as well. 4 goals, 10 points in 11 games. So we're talking about a guy who's only 27 years old, still very much in his prime. And he was on a very team-friendly contract, just under $7 million this year. I think he's looking for somewhere around the $9-10 million mark. So you've got to consider that if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan. As for what you're going to recoup if you had to trade him, Montreal Canadiens fans are not going to like it.
No.
You're not going to get a Michael Matheson for a William Nylander. It might be a Cole Caufield that goes the other way, or a guy of that ilk. Maybe it's even a Slavkovsky.
Caden Gooley.
Yeah. Do you want to part ways for a guy that, at his best, William Nylander is dynamic, a great skater, can fill the net. At his worst, he goes 2-3 weeks without scoring. Sometimes it looks like he's not even playing or interested in playing during those 2 to 3 weeks. So he's a guy that if he's not producing offensively, he doesn't do a lot for you. He's not going to block shots. He's not going to finish hits. He's not going to do the stuff that Brendan Gallagher does when he's not producing, which is provide those intangibles. So there's a good side and a bad side. What I would say is if you're the Montreal Canadiens, I don't think you need William Nylander. You've got a lot of guys that could grow up to be that guy. We're going to cost you a lot less money. And for where Montreal is right now, it's just not the right time. So, that being said, could I see William Nylander possibly moving on from Toronto? Yeah, if the contract negotiations drag on and the money and the term is just not working out, then for sure. I could see a lot of teams, whether it's maybe a Washington Capitals or Philadelphia Flyers, or maybe even the Pittsburgh Penguins, if Kyle Dubas wants to go get someone that he's really familiar with. But Montreal, I don't see it happening.
Well, we appreciate the question from Jeremy in Alberta, and we're glad that Michael was here to answer that. Michael, before we let you go, we want to ask you a little quiz question. We gave you this. You don't know what's coming. This is going to be a surprise for you. So we'll give you a minute to think about it. But our quiz today, our quiz question is for you to name 5 players who played for both the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens. And if I had the Jeopardy music here, I'd play it. But you're on the spot. Who are 5 players who played for both the Leafs and the Canadiens?
Oh, boy, that's a tough one. Okay, so let's see. Darcy Tucker.
Yeah.
Mike Komisarek.
That's right.
Mikhail Grabovski.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Gilmour.
Yeah.
When I got one more.
You actually mentioned him earlier in the show. One of them. Yeah.
I mentioned him earlier in the show.
Darcy Tucker would fit.
Yeah, I said Tucker.
That was the first one he gave.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm one away.
All right.
You have Tucker, Komisarek, Grabovski, and Gilmour.
Sorry, what was that?
Frank Mahovlich.
Frank Mahovlich, absolutely, the big M. That's great.
I gotta go one old guy, right?
Well, I love Dick Duff, and he was terrific when he came to the Canadiens. But yeah, Thomas Plekanec for his brief stop in.
That's right.
All right.
With the Leafs.
He was the most miserable Leaf, I could tell you that. Just because he was, of all the teams to get traded to, Toronto was dead last on his list. If he was able to veto that, he would have.
And one other I'll toss out, and that's John Kordick. He appeared in my article, The Top 5 Canadiens Enforcers, on the Hockey News a week or so ago, but also played for the Leafs.
Full out round of applause, though.
Yeah.
Mr. Traikos, you
well done.
put on the spot and delivered. I love it.
I'm waiting for my prize now. So
It's in the mail. Yeah.
Well, Michael,
maybe Toronto Montreal Stanley Cup final once they get thrown into different division or different conferences one of these days.
oh, there you go. There you go. That would
You
be
and I
fantastic.
both. That would be terrific.
Well,
that is one of the parts that kills me is that they're in the same division. I'm like, they'll never meet again in the Stanley Cup final. What a travesty.
That's true. It's everyone just wants to see them compete in the playoffs. But yeah, the fact that they're same conference, same division, that's won't have a final anymore. Michael, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a terrific first appearance and conversation with you here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. I encourage all of our listeners, go follow Michael Traikos on Twitter or X or whatever you're calling it these days. You can find him at Michael_Traikos. That's TRAIKOS. And we thank you so much for taking some time out of your August schedule to chat with us. And we certainly hope you come back again soon.
Perfect. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Great to have Michael Traikos in the studio to talk about the rivalry. I think from a Canadiens perspective, that fans always love to see the Leafs and the Habs match up, and no matter where the two teams are in the standings, it's always an exciting game, and the Canadiens do well and listen for until they meet in the playoffs again. Canadiens fans are always going to remind Leafs fans that it was 3-1.
It was 3-1.
Back in 2021.
Thanks once again to Michael for joining us on the show. It was really a lot of fun having a chat with him, and we certainly hope he comes back soon. We are going to take our final break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. Up next, we've got some listener comments. We've got some fantasy sports news. We've got some information if you're interested in joining the Rocket Sports team for the upcoming season. Lots to cover. Don't go anywhere. You want to stay with us because you're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio. It's summertime, and it means that, of course, it's music listening time, whether you are chilling at the beach or at the lake or at the cottage, even in your backyard, out for a walk or a jog, or driving and cruising with the windows down or the top down if you're lucky enough to have a convertible. It is summer music season. What have you got playing on your favorite summer playlist right now? I've been listening to a lot of classic rock, a lot of 70s and 80s. Even if you're not going on vacation, summer is all about that vacation state of mind. And so whether you want to listen to those favorite tunes on repeat or you just need to retreat inside your own head for a little bit, it's so much fun to create your own summer soundtrack. And I like to do that by popping in my Raycon wireless earbuds. There's just so much going on all summer, and sometimes you need some upbeat music to just pump you up before you go out and hit the beach with some friends or head over to a family barbecue, or maybe you want to relax a little bit with some calmer music, guided meditation. No matter what it is, if you're taking your earbuds on the go with you, maybe to the gym, like I said, out for a jog or a walk, or maybe you're just relaxing at home and you want some great tunes. I love to listen to music while I'm in the kitchen working, whether I'm cleaning or whether I'm cooking, baking, that kind of thing. So let me tell you, having your Raycon wireless earbuds is a great way to do that. They are the best way to listen to your music. You can use the earbud tap functions to toggle between 3 customizable sound profiles, noise isolation, and awareness mode, which allows some environmental sounds in so that you can still kind of hear what's going on around you if you want. Raycons have a 32-hour battery life, including 8 hours of playtime, so you can really listen to what you want, when you want, for a really long time. They come with custom gel tips for the most comfortable in-ear fit. That's a big one for me. In-ear earbuds and gel tips are typically difficult to fit inside my ear so that they fit and stay in my ear. Have not had an issue with my Raycons at all. And they start at just half the price of other premium audio brands, but they sound just as good, if not better. Raycons come with a 30-day happiness guarantee, so you really can't lose.
So you can create your own soundtrack with Raycon. And right now, Canadiens Connection listeners can get 15% off their Raycon order at buyraycon.com/THPN. Really, this is an incentive just for listeners of the Canadiens Connection. We want you to take advantage of this offer. So again, that's buyraycon.com/THPN to save 15% on Raycons. buyraycon.com/THPN.
And welcome back to episode 258 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. You can follow at Habs Connection. That is this podcast's account. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit our website, canadiensconnection.fm. And of course, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to this podcast, and text us at any time. Get involved. Make your voice heard. Maybe you'll hear us read your comment on an upcoming episode, like we're going to do with some of our listener comments in this segment. And you can text us anytime at the Rocket Sports text line, which is, of course, 585-3-ROCKET. First and foremost, though, before we get to your comments and some of the things that our listeners had to say, we want to get you caught up on any content from the Rocket Sports Media team across all of our platforms that you might have missed this week while you're out there enjoying all this beautiful summer weather. And of course, first up, one thing, this is new for this season, so we are going to keep repeating this one quite often. Be sure that you bookmark our brand new Hockey News Montreal team site web address. That is where you are going to find all of the Rocket Sports team's coverage of the Montreal Canadiens, the Laval Rocket, the ECHL Trois-Rivières Lions, Habs prospects in general. All of that coverage is going to be found in one place, and that is thn.com/Montreal. It stands for the Hockey News. thn.com/Montreal. And one of the things that you'll find if you go there this week, in fact, is an article written by Rick Stevens, the report when it came out that Logan Mailloux seems to have been cleared to play in the NHL. So that's one of the things that you can go back and read all the details about that if you missed that announcement earlier this week.
It's all the Canadiens coverage, all the Montreal Canadiens coverage in just one place. That's thn.com/Montreal. I appreciate the really nice, kind words, compliment from Michael Traikos about me, about the team that we're bringing to the Hockey News. We brought to the Hockey News. So in the past, we've had various websites you'd go to. This year, just one, thn.com/Montreal. You'll find work from myself, from Amy, from Chris, from the entire team at thn.com/Montreal.
Also, be sure you, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/allhabs, or if you're just on the YouTube app, you just search for @allhabs and you'll find our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell. That way you automatically get notified anytime we upload a new video. I host a weekly show there called Habs Hockey Report that comes out on Thursdays, which is a short form, usually 10 minutes or less. Just kind of look at whatever the hottest topic of the week surrounding the Montreal Canadiens is, a bit of commentary, analysis, opinion, that type of thing. Also, the Canadiens Connection podcast appears on our YouTube channel. A couple of days after it's been released on podcast platforms, it then is released on YouTube as well. You can find that on Mondays. So be sure you hit subscribe and hit that notification bell. And also, while you're tapping subscribe buttons, be sure that you've done that for both of our Rocket Sports Radio podcasts, not only this one, Canadiens Connection, which you can find at canadiensconnection.fm, but also The Press Zone, which you can find at thepresszone.fm. That is our weekly Laval Rocket-focused podcast hosted by myself. comes out every Tuesday. We talk about the Laval Rocket, but Patrick Williams, our AHL guru, who writes, he's an AHL feature writer for NHL.com and the AHL's official website as well. He joins the show every week for the AHL Hot Stove to kind of give us an insight on things happening all around the American Hockey League. And Rick Stevens joins the show as here and there, usually at least once a month, to offer his insight as well. So it's very fun. Make sure you are subscribed. Rick mentioned at the top of the show that it is getting to be fantasy football season now that final cuts are happening to NFL rosters. Yes, this is a hockey podcast. Yes, we will have fantasy hockey to talk about once we get to that stage, but it's fantasy football time right now. And that is sometimes with a lot of people a very popular area of fantasy sports. We actually have 3 fantasy football leagues here at Rocket Sports, and we have one open position on one of our fantasy football teams. It is for those of you who are in the know with fantasy football, it's a PPR league. We have one position open. So if you would like, Rick, tell them how can they let us know if they want to be the manager that takes over that one open spot in one of our fantasy football leagues.
And I'll just add that our leagues use the Yahoo fantasy platform. But you can reach out to us, 5853-ROCKET, via text. And be sure to leave your email address if you do that method. Or our email is hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. You can reach out to us by email. Also, you can hit us up on social media.
Be sure to do it quickly because the draft is rapidly approaching. So as soon as you hear this, if you are interested, drop us a message and let us know. It is also recruiting season. We've got some openings for positions if people are interested in joining the Rocket Sports team for this upcoming hockey season. We've actually already had a couple of applications, some people showing their interest as well. Rick, can you tell everyone what they should do if they're interested in even just in exploring what potentially could be available for them to do if they would like to be part of the team here at Rocket Sports?
Yeah, I've been really pleased with the response. Lots of people reaching out to us. We may have some announcements pretty soon. But we'd like to hear from you if you have an interest, if you feel that you have some talent, whether it be in writing, whether it be in podcast producing, whether it be in graphics, whether it be whatever it is. If you feel you have a skill and a talent and want to be involved in a pretty exciting team, then reach out to us to be part of the Rocket Sports team. You can send us a text, you can send us an email, but the most direct way is go to habshockeyreport.com, and there's a Join Our Team tab, short application form. You can submit that and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
In continuing our series of getting to know our current Rocket Sports team, Michael Spinella was back in the studio this week with another one of our colleagues and team members. His name is Gustav, and so we'd like to get you to take a listen to this interview and get to know Gustav a little bit better.
Thanks, guys, and I would like to introduce Gustav, one of our Rocket Sports contributors. How are you doing today, Gustav?
I'm good. How are you, Michael?
Not too bad. Thank you for stepping into the studio to chat with us today. This is going to be a nice, fun, get-to-know-you type segment. I know you've been around with Rocket Sports for a little while yet, but can you tell us a story about how you joined Rocket Sports and what sorts of things you do for your contributions?
Yes, of course, Michael. So I joined Rocket Sports a couple of months ago, and actually joined through the website, so the join our team option on the website after hearing the call on the podcast. So on the podcast for a couple of episodes, you and Rick mentioned that the team is looking for staff members to contribute to the team. So I heard the call and I said, why not? I'll take a shot at it, and I applied. And for the past couple of months, my contribution has been mostly writing headlines. So maybe some of the fans have seen some of my headlines. I think I wrote around 6 or 7 so far. A lot of stuff on prospects because I like talking about prospects and other things related to coaches, team management, etc.
Yeah, and honestly, I've had a chance to read through a lot of your stuff, and I've really enjoyed it so far. So far, you're doing a really good job with that. You mentioned that you heard about this on the podcast, so I take it you've been listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast a little bit before you joined Rocket Sports.
Yes, I actually been listening to the podcast for almost 2 years, I think now.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. I appreciate that you've been listening to that. But I guess a little bit back more towards you. Did you grow up a Montreal Canadiens fan? And how did you pick up this fandom? Was this something that you got from your parents, or was this more something you came up with all on your own?
Yeah, so it's actually I grew up as an Ottawa Senators fan.
Nice.
So because I lived in Ottawa, so I was raised in Ottawa all throughout my young life. So that was when I was very young. But then I kind of changed team when I was still pretty young because all my family and brothers were Habs fan. So I think I guess I would have changed team in 2004 or 5 or thereabout. I was 8 years old, I think, when I changed team. As a child, I didn't know the consequence or impact of changing team. So I hope there's not angry Senators fans out there.
Yeah, I grew up a Sens fan myself, but I've been in Montreal for a couple years now, so I'm going for the home team now. But it's so nice to hear that we can relate on that note just a little bit. Did you have a favorite player that you enjoyed watching growing up?
Yeah, actually, well, like a lot of people my age, just to give an idea, I'm 27 years old, so I was born in 96. So my favorite player was Carey Price, and I would add Markov to the list as second favorite player. So those were my two favorites for Habs. And of course, as a non-Hab, it would be Crosby. Was my go-to player when I was younger.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So can I ask where exactly are you located? I know a lot of our Rocket Sports contributors are like all across Canada. We have Amy Johnson located south of the border near Pennsylvania. So whereabout are you on the map?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So right now I live in Gatineau, so right near the Ottawa border and where the Senators play. Well, actually, it's quite a drive to go to Senators play, but I could go if I wanted to. And it's an area where I think there's a lot of Habs fans, some Senators fans also, but I do see some Habs jersey when I walk around in Gatineau or when I go for a hike. So but yeah, there's a couple of Habs fans out there in Gatineau.
Yeah, it's a pretty good mix up there. Have you had a chance to attend a Habs game in person? And can I ask where it was?
Yes, so I actually had a chance to attend to a Habs game like a couple of years ago. It was against the New York Islanders. They lost, I think, 2-0 that game. But it was a very good experience, and it was at the Bell Center. So I went all the way to Montreal, watch the game because I wanted to see them play at home.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Have you attended any of the games in Ottawa for the Senators?
Yes, actually, again, a couple of years ago when I was in university, I won tickets to Ottawa Senators game. They won. They were playing against the Minnesota Wild, and they won in overtime. So it was a very exciting game, and it was pretty good tickets for a price one.
Yeah, that sounds like a really awesome experience. Nice to hear that you've had a chance to watch a lot of hockey in person. And my last question for you before I send it off here, do you have a favorite piece of hockey memorabilia?
That's a very good question, actually. Um, because I'm young, I would say I don't have a lot of like memorabilia or attachment to kind of have history. But I do have some hockey cards,
Nice.
which sounds weird. That I don't think they're much of value. They're like from McDonald's when they still had hockey cards, and I have a Paul Kariya hockey card, and I think that's the most valuable one, and I cherish it, and I still have it somewhere in a box.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, Paul Kariya hockey card's a nice piece of hockey memorabilia, so you don't have to play yourself down too much. But Gustav, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today, and it was really awesome getting to know you.
You're welcome, Michael. Anytime.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Gustav. Again, this is an interesting case where Gustav came and said he's a policy analyst, a really good writer as far as policy goes, but he wanted to learn sports writing and how sports writing was different, and he wanted a platform to air his views, to share his thoughts about the Montreal Canadiens. And went through a training program and is now one of our feature writers. So again, this is something that if you're interested in, reach out to us and we'll see if there's a spot for you.
And again, the way to do that, go to habshockeyreport.com and click the Join Our Team tab to submit an application. All right. Don't forget, we have a Canadiens Connection question of the week that we want to hear your answers to, whether you send us an email at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com, whether you send us a text at 5853-ROCKET, whether you drop us a comment on Twitter or Facebook and Instagram. We want to know, what is your favorite Habs versus Leafs memory? That's it might be tough for, you might have like one and an honorable mention, or maybe your top three, but what's your favorite moment and memory from the Habs versus Leafs rivalry?
And maybe you're looking for moments to be created. Opening night this season, first regular season game for the Montreal Canadiens is in Toronto against the Leafs on the 11th of October. And Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach is getting close to the 100-point mark, 97 points in his career in 210 NHL games. Could he hit that 100-point mark in the very first game of the season against Toronto?
That'd be kind of fun. We, of course, have heard lots and lots and lots of comments and feedback from you over the course of the past week. First up, we just wanted to pick out a few of them to read to you. And the first is a response from last week's episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. If you'll recall, Rick and I were discussing what a younger Habs roster means for the upcoming 2023-24 season. Chris from Ottawa wrote in and said, exciting future. I think this is a huge year in a lot of ways. Watching all the young guys in Laval compete with each other for ice time will be as exciting as watching Montreal.
And we'll have that Laval coverage for you as well.
We definitely will.
When we promoted the Canadiens Connection, that's episode 257. As you said, what does a younger Habs roster mean for the coming year? We also asked, who are you looking forward to see? And Daniel on Twitter said, without sounding corny, I'm looking forward to seeing all of them. I think it's a good group and hoping all will shine. We need these young guns to take the next step. If not, we're in trouble. If I have to pick one guy to focus on, it would be Logan Mailloux. I'm pulling hard for him.
Well, Casey from Montreal also mentions Logan Mailloux, saying, this is exciting news for Logan Mailloux, one of the many Canadiens prospects. I would love to see what he'll do in training camp.
And as we talked about in the second segment with Michael Traikos, Jeremy from Alberta, he said he's been listening to the podcast for a long time, and he asked a question about William Nylander, and Michael Traikos answered it expertly and from a Leafs perspective. I'll only add to that if Nylander was the player that was acquired by the Canadiens, as we heard, it may be unlikely. But I don't know that he would work well with Suzuki and Caufield, as Jeremy asked, and mainly because you need somebody who's going to retrieve the puck. You need a player on that line with Suzuki and Caufield who's going to play on the defensive side. Caufield doesn't play that way. Nylander doesn't play that way. Suzuki, his defensive numbers, he can play a two-way game, but his defensive numbers have been tough. That's why I think Kirby Dach has worked so well on that line, because he is a puck retrieval kind of specialist. But that's not to say that that's where Kirby Dach should be. As we've said, we want to see him centering his own line, the second line, and maybe that's where a William Nylander could fit in and be effective.
Don't forget, if you would like to maybe hear your comment and response to this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week on next week's show, once again, that question is, what is your favorite Habs versus Leafs memory? Be sure to shoot us a text at 585-3-ROCKET, and hopefully we'll be reading your comment on the show next week, which is the next Canadiens Connection episode. Happens next Saturday, September 2nd. That's crazy. I will be back one more time for wrapping up my little trilogy of Canadiens Connection appearances for this late summer set of podcasts.
Thanks for being here today.
It was a great show. It was fun. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun to talk to Michael Traikos. It was great being in the studio with you, and I look forward to being back again next week. We look forward to visiting with all of you again next week. Don't forget, if you haven't done so already, tap that subscribe button for the Canadiens Connection podcast, and then come right back again next Saturday for another fun edition of the Canadiens Connection podcast right here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.